Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined by John Gibson for our first episode of this summer's Let's Talk About series. You guys will remember the last couple of years, me and John, once the season has ended or during the international breaks as well, we come onto the podcast with one topic in mind and we focus on it and we delve deep into it. This time, to kick off the series, it's going to be all about Anthony Gordon. I'm a man who is definitely on the tongues of most supporters when it comes to potentially cashing in on him this summer, which I don't agree with, but we'll get John's opinion on that in a moment. But first, John, how are you enjoying the slow start to the transfer window for Newcastle United?
There's always something to worry about, isn't there? There really is. And the worry, the concern is heightened by the fact that we've done nothing in the previous three transfer windows. So they're all saying, we're going to go down that route again. We're about to lose two big execs behind the scenes in Eales and Mitchell. Uh, we've lost a couple of targets already, the Brentford guy and Delap. So there's a little twitch, and there's bound to be because Eddie himself urged us to get off on the front foot, didn't he? And this is not quite the front foot. But it's early days. There's no need to panic yet. But it will calm nerves, including mine, when we get the first signing through the door, because it is absolutely essential that we make quite a few signings this summer to bolster the squad, not just the team. And so, yes, I've been a little concerned, mainly because I've seen other teams doing it, getting off to the flyer. And remember, it was Eddie that said, look, let's get off to a quick start because good players disappear if you don't. Well, he thought the Brentford winger was a good player. He thought Delap was a good player. He thought Cunha was a good player. All three have disappeared. He's right. They do disappear early, some of them, and they've disappeared. So I'm anxious that we do get in amongst them and make a statement as early as possible.
Indeed. Now, we're recording this on Thursday, the 5th
Mm.
of June. It'll come out on Friday, the 6th. I mean, I'm not expecting any big signings
No.
in 24 hours, but we're just pointing out when we are indeed recording this episode. Before we get on to Anthony Gordon, just a big thanks to our new sponsors, Saily, which is a new eSIM service app brought to you by the creators of NordVPN. You can choose from several affordable eSIM data plans in over 200 destinations with a Saily eSIM. You'll always have a connection when needed. The eSIM provides an internet connection wherever you travel and saves you money on the roaming fees. You can avoid scams, you can protect your privacy, you save time as well. You have the choice between global and regional plans. It's very affordable, and all you do is download the app once and then you are away with it. There is a link in our podcast description box where you can get a very exclusive offer on your eSIM provided by Saily. So thanks to them for sponsoring the podcast throughout the summer. Do click on the link and sign up. Right, John. Anthony Gordon. It's funny because if we think about this time last year and all the links to Liverpool, and people were very, very angry. That can't happen. He's so important. He is still very important in my view. I've gone on and said he's probably the third or fourth most important member of this Newcastle United squad. But you look on social media, you talk to Newcastle United fans, and I do think the temperature has changed somewhat when it comes to Anthony Gordon. And a lot more people are saying if Liverpool come in with 80, 85, 90 million pounds, it might not be the worst thing to do and cash in. Where do you stand on it?
Well, if they do that for a start, there's no certainty that they will. I think we've got to be careful what you wish for. It's very easy to knee jerk. That's what fans do, and I include myself in this, and you in this, because we're fans as well as professionals. And it's easy to knee jerk. I mean, you've just got to think. Not only 1 year ago was it unthinkable that we sold him, but I mean, prior to Wembley, there were suggestions that if we have to cash in on somebody of good reputation to give us wiggle room in the transfer market, we should sell Bonds because he couldn't get in the team for Gordon. Now all of a sudden, Bonds is sugar coated, and we should sell Gordon. And we've got to be careful. It is a hot topic of debate, and it's not often, is it? that the hot topic of debate, should we sell or not, would be around a current England international. Anthony Gordon's away with England now, and over the next 2 or 3 days could play for them twice in a World Cup qualifier and a friendly, and yet he's splitting the fan base. And and I can understand why. Don't get me wrong. I can understand why, because his body language has not been good in the second half of the season. Liverpool stayed around like a bad smell. They keep coming back, at least on line. They're linked by the Liverpool press, etc., with coming back from. It unquestionably turned his head to start with, and he had a bad second half to the season from just before Wembley onwards. But I don't think the season was an actual catastrophe that a lot of people are now making it out to be. And we've got to be careful. You can knee jerk a situation. As I say, before Wembley, we could have sold Bonds. Now we could sell Gordon. We've got to be careful because players have come through after having a bad time. If if Gordon's having a bad time now, think of Joe Linton. We could have sold Joe Linton when he was a centre forward, couldn't we? Chucked him out. And what would we have missed as a rampaging midfielder? We could have sold Fabian Shaw under Steve Bruce because he couldn't even get in the team under Steve Bruce. And he's appeared now to be the Cary Grant of the Premier League, like Mr. Cool. And we could have easily sold Jacob Murphy 6 times over during his spell here, couldn't he? And now he's had the best season he's ever had, and some people have touted him for England. So you've got to be careful that you don't knee jerk people out of the club too early. Is this a dip in form? Is it a dip in attitude? Um, is his head being turned elsewhere? You've got to look into all these things. And the only guy outside of Anthony Gordon himself who really knows what's going on is Eddie Howe. Is he's got bad body language. What's he like during the week? Is he detached now? Is he a little bit irritating? Is he totally committed? Is he just a bit lost? I mean, there's all those things have got to be taken into consideration. It's also got to be taken into consideration, Andrew, in my opinion, that he hasn't had a lot of rest, since he come to Newcastle. Close seasons, he played in if I remember off the top of my head, he played in the England under-21 side that won the Euros all summer. Then he had England again, etc., etc. He hasn't had a lot of rest. And I know he's away with England at the moment, but I'm hoping after that he'll get a rest this summer. But you know what? As well as resting the body, Andrew, I want to see him rest his mind and clear his mind. He's got to clear his mind, decide if his future is with Newcastle or Liverpool or elsewhere, and commit himself wholly to the cause. You can't have one foot in and one foot out because it'll not
No,
work. You've got to be wholly committed.
yep, spot on. And I remember having a similar conversation with you a couple of years back because obviously Anthony Gordon joined in the
Yeah,
January of 2023, 16 games, 1 goal. And a lot of people were saying, well, we're there. We don't need another winger. Of course, we had Alan St. Maximin at the time as well. What are we doing spending all this money on Gordon? It didn't quite go to plan in his first few months at Newcastle. But we both sat here, John, and said, full preseason under Eddie Howe, and you're going to see a totally different player at Newcastle United. And of course, he went on to have a storming season with 11 goals, 12 goals in all competitions. That's the real Anthony Gordon. And also, you look back at this season just gone. I mean, he had an absolute belter a few months between November and January, 5 assists in the Premier League, 4 goals. You had goals in both legs of the semi-final against Arsenal. There was an assist in the round before against Brentford. He was absolutely crucial to Newcastle's run of form, which has really led them to Wembley and to where they are now, because they went on that massive winning run, didn't they? And that's the real Anthony Gordon. I think his red card against Brighton obviously derailed his season somewhat. And then you had Harvey Barnes coming in, filling the void really, really well. chipping in with goals, chipping in with assists. So it's not just about the fact that you got sent off and missed a Wembley final, because some players in that position of his talent and ability, John, would just automatically come back in. I missed 3 games through the suspension, back in, job done. But he didn't have that. He had Barnes, playing really well. Then he picked up an injury as well for England,
I was
didn't he?
going to
So
say, you've got to remember that at the end of his 3-match suspension, he had an injury picked up with England. So it wasn't just a matter of being able to come straight back in. That's absolutely true. I think the worry we have with Anthony is, first of all, I think he's a confidence player. And if his confidence isn't high because he's been out of the team, etc., he looks as if he's got the cares of the world on his shoulder. And I think he's a strong-willed guy that can't get his head turned. I mean, he didn't leave Everton in the best of circumstances. He split the Everton fan base, didn't he? Because they thought his attitude wasn't correct, and now he's in danger of splitting our fan base. I mean, we've got to remember how good he looked in that first season. When you go back to the 6 months when he didn't look so good, we know why, Andrew. It was because he wasn't fit enough by Eddie Howe standards. He was fit enough by Everton standards and by most other clubs, but with us, with the relentless pressing, the amount of work you've got to do off the ball as well as on the ball, you've got to be super, super fit. And it took him a little while to get up to that fitness. Then we saw the great, great player he is. But I mean, I honestly believe the ball is in his court. He has got to get himself, once these 2 England matches out the way, he's got to go on holiday and not just think about the sun and the sun cream and where the glass of wine is at night time, of which he's got every right to think about. It's his summer holidays and we'll want him to rest. But I want him to clear his mind. What do you really want, Anthony? Do you really want to go to Liverpool or somewhere else? Is the grass, in your opinion, really greener elsewhere? Or if you want to be part of Newcastle and you've seen how well Harvey Barnes has done and you've seen what we're going to do in the transfer market, hopefully this summer, then you better get a grip and get on with it. Because I don't believe we should sell him this summer. I think there's a very good player in there which we saw in that first full season he had, and he could come back to haunt us. But I won't wait indefinitely for him to get back to that. He has got to prove to himself and then to Eddie Howe and then to the fans that Newcastle United is what it's all about for him. Remember, in his side, he was running about and he was making tackles, forcing the ball out, and doing the Joe Linton and Bruno stuff to the crowd with clenched fists and this one. He just wanted to throw in. But he was doing all that's 200% committed. I don't mean everybody should go around doing it, but it's not quite like that with him now. And I think he's got to sort his mind out. Yes, his body needs a rest, but his mind needs clearing.
And I wonder as well if he's struggling to maybe deal with the fact that he's got real competition there on the left with Harvey Barnes. And what we want, ideally, is both of them fit and fighting one another going into the new season, because you want 2 players of that quality in every position at the very least. That's how you build a good squad depth. But obviously he was the main man the season before last, 11 goals and, in for player of the season. I think he actually won our player of the season, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, he was absolutely fantastic as Newcastle United, unfortunately, just missed out on Europe. This time around, they've got into the Champions League really without him, because when he was brought back into the side at the expense of Harvey Barnes on that left, which frustrated me slightly because I didn't think he'd done anything to warrant coming back and not at the expense of Barnes, he didn't take his opportunity. Like, not many players would get that opportunity, John. And for me, he was really, really disappointing. I think that's accelerated people's opinions and people's perhaps knee-jerk reactions to, yes, let's cash in if a bid comes in. For me, wouldn't cash in, but I do think maybe he's struggling with the fact that he's got real competition. Not just someone there to back him up or replace him on 60 minutes, but real competition.
Well, then that's something he's got to sort out in his mind to start with, because if he wants to be a top player, he's going to have real competition. Do you think he's going to have no real competition with England? Do you think he's going to have no real competition if he goes to Liverpool? I mean, if you're going to play in the Champions League, you've got to have real competition in every place. Hasn't Eddie Howe said he wants two top players for every position, which is what Manchester City, Pep at Manchester City had when they were regularly winning the Premier League titles. You've got to have you've got to have the best players. You're not going to get a free ride. On the other side of the coin, we say, don't players sometimes lose form because they know there's nobody pushing them for their position, so they can just showbiz? And you can't have it both ways. He's going to have do you think he's going to have no competition with Liverpool or no competition with England? Of course he's going to have competition. He can't be scared of Harvey Bonds. If he believes in himself, he's got to say, bring him on, pal. I'm better than that fella. And Harvey Bonds has got to say that about Gordon. That's the way it is. That he's now at the sharp end. He's not at Everton, where they'll be grateful for having somebody with respect to Everton, and they might change in the future with a new stadium and new owners and new manager. They might become much bigger than they have been of recent years. But he's not in that environment anymore. He's going to have competition, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, and hopefully when he returns to pre-season and he has Harvey Barnes on his shoulder, that it just motivate both players, because that's what we want. Do you think when he came back into the side toward the end of last season that it was the right decision to bring him back in? To me, he didn't look fit, especially not match fit. He looked a little bit off the pace, which is understandable with that injury that he had and obviously missing those games through suspension. He didn't look like the Anthony Gordon of the season before. And yes, partly maybe down to confidence, as you say, John. He's a confidence player. But I'm just thinking, did you think he was fit enough to play the role he did in the final
I
few
take
weeks?
the point. I take the point you're making totally, because he'd been out with suspension and out with an England injury, etc., etc. It was always just a matter of time before he come back, because he was agitating to come back behind the scenes. He's a current England international, and we've got to remember that. And therefore you're going to utilise him, and you can't play Harvey Barnes on the other side. I know it's not ideal, but this guy can play all the way along the front line as well. He can play a false nine and outside right as well as outside left. Unfortunately, both Barnes and him prefer to play outside left. Um, I didn't think so much it was his fitness that worried me, Andrew. It was his attitude. I thought he looked as if he had a chip on his shoulder. He looked as if he didn't believe in the project in the way he did. He was galloping free in that wonderful first full season he had. He was galloping free. He was like a little foal in the paddock, wasn't he? He was all over the place. He was wonderful. He was cheering up the crowd. He was doing everything. He seemed to be playing under a little bit of a black cloud. And that's why I'm talking about this summer. It's as important to get his mind clear as it is to get his body rested. Because when I watched him closely when he come back, I take the point about his fitness, because it can drop off if you're not playing well, especially where Newcastle play. But I thought he was losing half a yard in his mind, Andrew.
Well, I wonder it's because for the games before he started the Chelsea game, so he was on for 65 minutes of that Chelsea game, which Newcastle won 2-0. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games prior to that, in which he was available for, he didn't get many minutes at all. 12 minutes in the 4-1 win over Man United, half an hour against Crystal Palace, 25 against Villa down at Villa Park in that 4-1 defeat, 23 minutes against Ipswich at home, and 34 minutes against Brighton in that 1-1 draw down at the Amex. So maybe he was sitting there thinking, well, we're there. I'm ready. I'm available. I'm here. And it goes back to the point I made a couple of minutes ago about, was he struggling with the fact that he was not first choice? But rightly not first choice.
Yeah, yeah. I think like any good player that's been injured and then comes back and is available and isn't picked, he'll struggle with that. I don't know. It's not because he's got competition. He'll just think that I mean, he's biased. Of course, he's biased in his own favour, and he'll think he's got a right to come back. Wait a minute, I'm an England international. I'm the blue chip player with Newcastle United. I'm one of the top four with Bruno and Isaac and Tonali. I should be back in automatically. I don't think you're even looking at Harvey Barnes at that stage. You're just thinking like that. I should be back in. Stick Barnes somewhere else, etc., etc. But it's the way it is, and it's the way he's got to get used to. And I do think there's a problem there, which has sparked fans to be knee jerk, and I can understand why they are. And by the way, I will be greatly concerned if pre-season or in the early season games he looks to have the same problems, mind problems, as he had at the end of the season, because then it's a different ballgame. There's no point in keeping him if he's 50% Anthony Gordon. You want him 100% Anthony Gordon. But if he gets his mind clear this season, and it's a Champions League season, remember, this season he can be as sensational as he was in his first full season with us. Um, and we've got to be careful and not write him off too quick and write off a talent, because he has got quite an exceptional talent, and he's not the only one, but he has got that, and so we've got to be careful. But like anybody, A, if he doesn't want to be here, Andrew, or B, if his mind's scrambled for whatever reason, then go. But I'm not certain we've reached that stage yet.
No, I don't think we have, and I'll reiterate my point. I think he's the third or fourth most important player in this squad. I'm remembering Anthony Gordon of a couple of seasons ago, Anthony Gordon of that period between November and January where he was just absolutely electric. That's the Anthony Gordon that I love and that I think will reappear in the next season when we've got Champions League football, and obviously trying to really make a go of it on all fronts. So I've got full faith that Eddie Howe will work his magic and get him refocused and re-energized, and all this talk about selling them will be long forgotten. But I will ask you the question, John, of how much it would take you to cash in on Gordon. And although I've said I wouldn't, and he's that important, I think of the list of real sellable assets, you Isaac, Tonali, Bruno, Joe Linson, etc., he's probably the one that I would cash in on reluctantly out of that list. But it would take at least 100 million for me to say, okay, thank you very much, Anthony, but move on.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would take that amount to think about moving them on. I am a great believer, like you, that we'll see the original Anthony Gordon next season, the one that did so well in his first season with us. He's a superb talent. He's got waylaid. Things have happened. It hasn't worked from and his mind's been scrambled. I'm concerned more about his mind than I am about his body getting a rest, or about how fit and sharp he is. Um, and I'm always concerned. Some guys that can close off the noise. There's always noise around great players. Why don't you come and play for us? Because we're a super club and we'll give you twice as much money, and you'll win the Ballon d'Or, and you get all the noise. And a lot of players can shut the noise off. I'm not certain that Anthony Gordon is good at shutting the noise off. I think he listens naturally, and then it concerns him and he scrambles. I mean, when he had the time when Liverpool was on the go with him, and it was quite genuine that they were thinking of getting him, he knew all about it. He thought at one stage it was certain to happen. He was on England duty with at the time, and I've known players since back in the 70s, Andrew. When they go away with England, that's when they get their ears pummeled by other clubs saying, a club will say to a player, have a word with him while you're away with England. We fancy signing them, tell them what a great club you're at, etc., etc., etc. And the rumor was that Trent Alexander-Arnold was doing that when he was away with England at the time Liverpool looked as if we wanted him. A lot of it was banter and fun. Come and join us. We'll be great with each other. Two Scouse lads, all that sort of thing. By the way, Trent Alexander-Arnold telling Anthony Gordon that if he did, he's quickly buggered off, hasn't he? I mean, if Liverpool's so wonderful to go to, how's he in Madrid? So Andy Gordon can think about that. Wait a minute, wasn't it Trent that was saying to me, come and join because this is a wonderful club and we're going to win the Premier League title? Would you like to give Trent a ring now and ask why he's not at Liverpool? Why is it Real Madrid? The grass is not always green elsewhere. So perhaps it's not as green at Liverpool as you think it is. Um, but this happens on international duty. I remember going way back to the days in the 70s when Supermac was going away with England, scoring 30 goals a season. Every club was telling him that he should go and join them. But he had this ability to shut out noise until the time come, and the time came when Gordon Lee made it obvious he didn't want them, and then he did listen to one of the big clubs, and the big club was Arsenal. But Anthony Gordon's got to get his mind straight, and if he gets his mind straight, he's going to be a good player. And if just be honest, Anthony, with Eddie, if you want to go, say you want to go because Liverpool are Premier League champions or whatever, and go because of 50%. Anthony Gordon's not good enough for us, 100%. We adore. And the fans used to chant his name in that, didn't they? Andy Gordon, And by the way, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that he wants to go. It's natural for a young man to have his head turned by big clubs, especially a hometown club that's winning the Premier League title, to have your head turned. You've got to settle down from that, get it out of your system, and concentrate on what you've got here. I mean, if he was thinking a year ago when he was playing super duper and probably our player of the year and all that, and he got in the England team, if he was thinking, I want this team, this Newcastle team, to be ambitious. They've got the greatest fans in the country. They've got one of the greatest managers in the country. Everything's wonderful for me here, but we've got to make the major breakthrough. Then I'll say to you, we've just made the major breakthrough. We've won our first domestic trophy in 70 years. And by the way, you were on the bus with 300,000 and you were at Wembley with a medal around your neck, which is quite right. So you should be. You were just banned for one game in the final. You played in other ones. You were great in the semi-final. But we've just won our first trophy and made it in the Champions League. Do you not think we're moving in the right direction? Just get your head down, do the business here, and you will be absolutely adored here, as you saw when you were in your pump. Just clear your mind and get on with it because you're an outstanding player. And we up here, Geordies, love outstanding players. You go back to being that little foal in the paddock that you were a year ago, and you see the reaction you'll get yet again by the fans. They're very forgiving, they're very forgetful of his short period if you come out of it on the plus side.
I mean, as John says, there's no suggestion that Gordon wants to leave, and there's no suggestion either that someone like Liverpool are going to come in for him. And I think he will see what they've achieved in the season just gone. That's Newcastle, of course, and be dead excited to have a key part in the season to come where if they do sign the right players and enough of the right players, I don't think a cheeky title bid is out of the question. And why would you want to be anywhere else? The fans have shown so much love to Gordon. He's that kind of player who I think definitely taps into that. And that will hopefully persuade him just to, as you say, get your head down and get back to the Anthony Gordon we know he can be. I did ask people, John, to send in their thoughts on Anthony Gordon. But before I mention them, actually, just looking at the England squad, because you mentioned there, obviously, they've got games against Senegal and I think it's Andorra, isn't it? And you look at the players. Yeah, you look at the players who potentially could play on the wings for England. Obviously, Madawaki, who's linked to Newcastle United. Saka will play on the right. Eze can play centrally or on the left. It's going to be really interesting to see who Thomas Tuchel picks, isn't it? In these games, I suspect Gordon will start one of them. But more interestingly, I think when this squad was announced, if you'd asked Newcastle fans for their honest opinion and you'd named Murphy, Barnes, and Gordon, I know Murphy plays on the right, but you'd named all three of them and said, all right, which one's more likely to get into the England squad based on form and who deserves it right now? I think Gordon would have been bottom of those three. I think a lot of people were surprised Harvey Barnes didn't get a stronger shout, to be honest.
Yeah, we're getting knee jerky again. He's had half a season good, and I think he's got to do a little bit more than that. He's got to have a full season to start with. He's only got one England cap. He's 27, 28. I don't think there's a great England future ahead of him, though there can be. Look at Dan Burn, 32 when Dan Burn got his first cap. Murphy. I think he's fandabaldozy, but I mean, is he going to replace Saka? Is he going to replace Bourne at West Ham, who plays out there? Come on, I don't think so. So there's a case for all three, and there's a case against all three. It's funny, these two games coming up for Gordon. Which one would he prefer to play with? In the most important one, in theory, would be a World Cup qualifier, not a friendly. But Senegal's a tougher match. Andorra's is how many do you want? How many goals do you want? I mean, if I was Gordon, I would say I want to play in a World Cup qualifier because it just happens to be Andorra and I could get a hat trick. Anybody could get a hat trick. So Senegal's, it might be only a friendly, but it's a tougher game.
Well, I appreciate your points on Murphy and Barnes. I think Thomas Tuchel is always going to pick Gordon, and I think that's because he seems to have his favourites or set players that he's definitely going to pick. And I think that's benefited Gordon because of the form. And you mentioned Bowen there. I mean, he couldn't even get into the squad, and he scored 4 in his last 4. He had a tremendous end of the season, and it might be because Saka's on that side and what have you. But it's interesting how Tuchel's picked this squad, but I do think Gordon was slightly fortunate to get into it, and it's a big couple of games for him, and we want him to do well because he goes into the summer happy, comes back to pre-season, hopefully having a nice break and buzzing. If he has a bad couple of games that doesn't feature, what does that do for his mind and his holiday? But we'll wait and see. I'll just read out some thoughts that have been sent in, John, on social media. So Jeff says, I don't think he plays consistently well enough in away games. Most of his best performances are at home with the crowd behind him. He certainly hasn't progressed in the last 12 months. Maybe he's only good enough at a certain level and has reached his peak. Jeff, wow. I don't agree with Jeff there. I mean, that is brutal, isn't it?
Now old's Gordon to reach his peak? I mean,
He's
still
24.
what, 24? Yes, it's a bit early to reach your peak. But I mean, you're either black and white or white, aren't you? And forgive me, I don't mean Newcastle United. I mean, you're either a huge plus or you're a huge man. You're either flavour of the month or you're not. And it changes and it changes and it changes. I wouldn't call him a homer, which is almost what's been suggested by Jeff. But I do know where Jeff's coming from. But aren't most players best at home with 50,000 of their own fans behind them? I mean, and the team attacking so well, because most teams get better results at home than they do away, even if you're a bit of a counter-attacking side. I think some of that's harsh. I would certainly not think that he's reached his peak yet.
Thanks, Jeff, for that one. We've got Tommy saying one of the best and most valuable players at the club. On him versus Barnes, if you ask the other 19 managers in the Premier League which one they'd want, all would answer Gordon. That's the same reason he's in the England squad and Barnes isn't. Isaac says, quality player, but had a poor season compared to last year. Let his teammates and fans down for his red card, which didn't cost us in the end. Easily worth 80 million if you cashed in. Can be replaced, although I would prefer to keep him. Ryan says, still a great player who had been impacted by a lack of proper pre-season and a break, as John has said as well in this episode, due to England, and not to mention his head being scrambled by Liverpool. Crucial to the cup run in Arsenal semi-final. Let us down in the FA Cup and impacted by injury. Back him next season, which is essentially just this whole episode wrapped up in a single tweet. So thank you very much, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the final one came in on Blue Sky from Darren. It's just loading there, but it's similar to what John's also said. Seems to be a confidence player. A run of games will bring him back to the form we saw last season. Just difficult getting Gordon and Barnes performing in the same lineup. And that is also echoed by Mark, who says, the thing about Gordon is when he got sent off against Brighton in the FA Cup and Barnes came in, he's been absolutely excellent. Barnes and Gordon just haven't got the chance. Gordon just hasn't got the chance due to the form of Barnes. And that's it, in my opinion. So, majority of people backing him. Yes, they've raised the concerns, which I think everyone has raised, but saying next season, it's the old Anthony Gordon that we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we do want this competition. This competition is essential. And there will be, believe you me, if we're playing in the Premier League, the FA Cup, the League Cup, and the Champions League, there's going to be, you will find at the end of next season, if they're with us and are injury free, that both Gordon and Barnes will have racked up a big total of games, of appearances, because they can both play in different positions as well. Barnes can play either side. We know that both prefer the left. Uh, Gordon can play right away across the three. There's going to be, it's like the centre forward that we bring in. You say, oh, well, he won't get games with Isaac. He'll get a few games over a season. We're playing 8 in the very least in the Champions League this year. There will be plenty game time for players this season. You need a big squad. And, if we cash in on Barnes or Gordon because the other one is good, then what happens when one of them gets injured? The whole thing is that we staggered over the line in some ways for the Champions League at the end of the season with 2-1-0 defeats the last 2 games because we had a thin squad. Don't talk about selling Gordon. No, selling somebody else. We'll have a thinner squad. We're trying to boost the squad, not make it thinner than it is. I mean, I'm with you. I believe that we will see the right Anthony Gordon next season. The right Anthony Gordon is blue chip. He is absolute quality. We have seen what quality he is. Anthony, just have a rest, mate, and get your head sorted. Begin to realize what you realized in your great season is that this is the place to be. These are the fans to play for. You've got the quality. We love your skills. You haven't got a problem. Clear that nut of yours. Get all the negative thoughts out of it. Look at yourself. Look at where the club is, what it did last season with a trophy and the Champions League. This is liftoff. Stay aboard the rocket, be part of the liftoff. Don't get out and whoosh afterwards. I made a knee-jerk decision there. I'm not suggesting you do. Just don't listen to the noise, mate. You're best off where you are, and you're loved where you are when you do the business, and you're capable of doing the business.
There we go. So thank you very much for John for coming on to the podcast and providing the first episode of Let's Talk About. Next week, we'll talk about Lewis Miley. So any questions you have about Lewis Miley's future at Newcastle United, should he go out on loan? Will Eddie Howe keep him in and around the first team? Could he even break into the first team and displace one of the 3 giants currently in that midfield 3? Whatever your question, send it in over social media, send it in over email at the EIBW podcast at reachplc.com, and I'll put any questions to John. And if you want us to talk about any specific subjects as well, let me know, because we will gladly run through the list throughout the summer. Thank you once again to Saily for sponsoring the podcast. The link is in the podcast description box. And for myself and John, we will see you guys next week.